Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome out to this morning's Saturday morning workshop here, put on by TaxSaleSupport.com. I'm Shade Foray. I'm here with Stephen Swenson, and we're just happy to have all of you join us.
Yeah, absolutely. We try to throw these Saturday morning workshops about once a month, and open it to the general public and to our email list and to people that are watching our videos. So we definitely want to welcome you. If this is the first time you've attended one of our trainings, welcome. Or if you've checked out some of our trainings in the past, we want to welcome you back again.
Yeah, these workshops are always recorded, so you can always catch a replay afterwards if there's something that we don't cover in great enough depth, if you want to rehear it again. You're also welcome to ask questions throughout the workshop about any topics here, and we'll do our best to answer those.
Yeah, and in the past, we've done all kinds of different topics. We've talked about general tax sale investing. We've talked about buying land. We've talked about online auctions. We've talked about over-the-counter. So we've tried to cover a number of different topics on these Saturday morning workshops. But one thing that we haven't talked about up to this point is, how to buy, tax deed homes and structure properties. We've kind of, we've kind of focused on different aspects of it, but we've never actually talked about what is required and what needs to be done if you're going to buy homes.
Yeah, which is really a completely different type of investment compared to a lot of other investments. There are a lot of other factors you have to consider when you're going to buy some kind of property with a structure or with improvements on it, especially if you're an out-of-state investor. That can become an additional important factor. But when you're dealing with improvements in general, things change quite a bit. What's important changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a lot of investors, Shade kind of alluded to it, is that a lot of us are investing outside our own state. We live in Utah. There's limited amount of opportunity within our own state for tax sale investing, and so we've got to go outside our own state. And there's a lot of other people that are in similar type situations. And so when we're looking at investing into structures, there's really three factors or three things that we watch for and that we check out and that we research when investing in tax sale homes, or really any kind of tax sale property, but particularly homes and structured properties. That would be the condition, the market value, and then also any potential risk.
The property condition is an especially important factor here for tax sale properties, and part of this is due to the nature of how tax sale properties end up where they're at. We all probably know that when it comes to tax sale properties, there aren't that many people losing their homes to foreclosure. It's not something that happens all the time. It's fairly rare, and so
it's more common in the mortgage foreclosure.
Yeah, mortgage foreclosures are far more common. In fact, but the way we look at it, we would almost say that the mortgage foreclosure isn't a true foreclosure.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, at least. The mortgage foreclosure, in a mortgage foreclosure, the title never actually transfers out of the bank's name. So even though the property owner is on there and they're late with their taxes, they're late with their payment, it never actually leaves the bank's ownership. It's always in their ownership. A true foreclosure is a judicial foreclosure that's done through the courts, and that wipes out ownership rights to the property, which is exactly what happens when somebody doesn't pay their property taxes for long enough.
Yeah, exactly. So when we are looking at a potential deal or potential property, really the condition is going to be one of the most important things that we're going to consider in investing in the property or not investing.
Yeah, in fact, it's the biggest factor for the property. The raw land is something that we can easily evaluate and judge, but the condition of the property is harder to evaluate, and the estimates of value are going to be based on the property being in good, workable, usable condition.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the first things that we're going to do, especially if we're looking at structured properties, we're going to do what we call an on-site evaluation. So when we're looking at structured properties, we always recommend never buying a structured property without current photos or without going to the property yourself and viewing it in person.
Yeah, you certainly need to perform some kind of an on-site evaluation, whether it's you performing it or whether you have somebody else that is performing it and providing you with the information. The risk being, that you can't purchase something sight unseen, especially with tax sale properties, because we never really know what the condition of the property is going to be. And if the condition is bad enough, it can be a terrible investment.
Yeah, I mean, at least once a year, we'll get some investor that, has gone out there on their own and they tried buying a property sight unseen, and they've got themselves into a mess, and they're calling us up in a panic, because they hadn't done any education. They kind of went out there and just assumed things. And then suddenly, now they need help, and we've got to try to help them get out of a sticky situation. And so it's best to avoid that in the beginning. And so if you're investing out of state, it's not always feasible for you to drive past the property, but that's where, hiring or finding somebody that can do it for you is, and do that on-site evaluation is going to be key.
And the reason why this is, this is incredibly important is because we never really know exactly what the circumstances are, the situation surrounding the property. It could be something that's been sitting vacant for a long time. It could be condemned.
Yeah.
It could be, it could be livable. Maybe there's somebody living in it and everything with it is fine. But because it's odd to have them end up in the tax sale in the first place, you have to be careful about the properties that you buy, because they can have odd things surrounding them.
Yeah, exactly. So first, obviously, is if you can do it on your own. If you can go out there and do the on-site evaluation, that's always going to be, the best solution. If not, if you have family and friends, that's something we always talk about with our coaching students, is do you have anyone within that area that that could possibly go out there and view the properties for you? You can, they may do it for free. They may, you may pay them a fee to go out there and do it, pay them gas money, buy them lunch, whatever. But if you can get somebody that within that area, that's always a good choice in having them go out there and take current photos of the property for you.
Yeah. In fact, a lot of times, if you're investing in a certain location, you can actually pick locations kind of based on where you have opportunity. But if you don't have family and friends living somewhere, then the next best option to get somebody by the property to do an evaluation on, it's going to be a handyman. A handyman is somebody that generally does smaller jobs, and they're used to driving around to different sites and locations. And if you pick one that works in the area that the property is located in, then you should be able to get a handyman to go by and to take some images of the property, and also give you an evaluation on different problems that the property may have.
Yeah, absolutely. We always think the handyman is the best option, because also if you end up buying that property, you have somebody in place that can go out there and do some of the cleanup and things that are needed. You can also, place classified ad and find somebody there local, whether it be a handyman or somebody else that can drive past and take photos. But that's really the most important thing, is that we need current photos of the property to determine that condition. We're not going to be able to determine it, and we can only determine the condition from what we can see on the outside as well.
Yeah, I think there are also some new services that are out there that, in fact, we interviewed a guy where one of the new coaches that we're hiring was telling us about a service that he just saw that will actually go out to an area and take pictures and do soil samples and stuff like that on individual properties without breaking the bank on everyone. So there are a growing number of ways that we can go about doing this. It doesn't have to be one particular method. Like I said, there are companies, I think, out there that specialize in doing real estate photos.
Yeah. There's also some companies that do, real estate photography, but usually they're going to be more positioned to, if someone you'd hire if you're going to sell the home. They do kind of fancy photography, but you can also find a realtor. Usually realtors aren't going to go out and drive past a bunch of properties unless you already own them. But there is what's called a BPO. That's a broker price opinion. It's kind of like in comparative market analysis, and realtors are sometimes willing to do that as well.
Yeah, which, really, if you can find the right realtor to work with, a realtor could work out great. But on average, for a lot of tax sale properties, you're not going to be able to sell them through a realtor unless you can get something worked out with a wholesale deal. And that's something that you can probably look into other trainings for more information about in terms of how we sell the properties. But this is a pretty good example right here of the difference between an online evaluation and an on-site evaluation.
Yeah, exactly. So, the photo on the left was taken just using Google Earth from 2014, and then we sent somebody out to take a photo of the property from 2018 when we were looking at investing at a number of properties within this area. And we can see the condition. We can see the roof. If we actually look closer up at the top of the roof, there's actually some type of big piece of plyboard or something that's been put over where there was a hole in the roof. It's boarded up. The grass is obviously overgrown. So, we can, and this is a 4-year example. We could see this type of destruction within a month or two if it got burnt down, if there was some type of major damage or hurricane or a tree fell, or you just never know. And that's why it's so important that we don't just assume what we can see on Google Maps or Google Earth or some type of street side image is going to be good enough, even if it's from 2018. I mean, they can say, hey, 6 months ago or a year ago, it looked pretty good, but we still need to get that current photo before buying.
Yeah, having somebody living in the property, might not seem like it would be such a big deal, but it makes a tremendous difference in the upkeep of the house and in what happens with the property. Homes that are lived in tend to be better cared for. When things come up, when problems come up, which they always do come up, things get fixed, and you've got somebody that's attentive to the property. That's the biggest difference between them. But having a property that's empty can be a problem, and you can see some of the things that begin to happen as properties are empty. That's something that we look at. It could still have potential, but when we're buying properties with improvements, especially from out of state, we're trying to give a lot of allowance for repairs. We're trying to catch anything that might possibly need work. And so when we see a property like this, it's just too much.
Yeah, the boarded up windows wouldn't necessarily always mean a bad thing. If the property condition on the outside, the structure, what we can see looks good. The roof looks good, the foundation, the walls, the brick, stucco, anything like that looks good, then if it's boarded up, they probably did that to protect it, so that somebody doesn't break into it and just living in it, rent-free or vagrants or anything like that. They're actually doing it to protect the property. So there's a lot of things that we're gonna judge. Shay talked a little bit about properties that have homeowners, have people in them, and that's something that we'll see as well, depending on what type of auction. If we're looking at a property that's coming up for auction, it very well could still be occupied.
Yeah. In fact, occupied properties can be great properties to choose. In general, if we're going to look at properties with improvements, I think what we're trying to find with the property is signs that somebody cared for the property and loved it at some point. Which if the home is older, then we're going to be looking for the types of things that are going to go out, generally after a few decades of home ownership. Things like a roof.
Yeah.
A roof is going to be one of those things that will generally not last much more than 20 or 30 years. And so they're a common thing for people to have to replace. But if somebody's just willing to replace the roof, then there's a higher chance that they've updated things like electrical and plumbing and stuff inside.
Well, and if the roof looks good, it means that it's less likely there's water damage.
Yeah.
From some type of leaky roof or something. That's something that can cost, that can be a huge problem and expense, is if suddenly you've got water damage and now you've got not only the the water damage itself, but you've got mold or anything like that that could really make a project totally over budget.
Yeah, in fact, when I was growing up younger, one of my friends started a water damage restoration company, and I remember working with him on different flood, different projects and places where people had their homes flooded, and Water damage is amazing, what it can do to destroy a house, how quickly it can do it, and how difficult it is to mitigate the damage. So we want to be really careful of anything that's allowing any kind of moisture or water into the house. So the roof is going to be one of the biggest things that we check. We're also looking for to make sure that the property's it's basically closed. It's not opened up. You know, you don't have that it's not wide open. And then from there, we also look at things like the landscaping. You know, that's a little thing that can be a sign if somebody's cared for the property or not.
Yeah.
You know, so if we can see a property that has some degree of landscaping there and the roof looks pretty good, you know, it's signs to us that somebody cared enough about the property that a lot of the issues that we might come across inside, chances are, you know, it's going to be similar in terms of things being taken care of.
Yeah.
At least that's what we hope for.
Yeah, exactly. You know, we're always going to be able to look at that outside and judge that outside, and that's going to give us at least an indication of the inside. The inside could be perfect, it could be trashed. You know, depending on the type of property, we may not be able to see most of the time what's it within the inside.
Well, and that's something else that's worth mentioning here is that we can't access the insides of properties. You know, when it comes to tax sale investing, this is not something where you're going to get the keys to the property.
Yeah, you're sending over your you know, your property evaluator to go through and check everything.
Yeah, it's not going to work like that. You know, in fact, you know, you're not going to be able to view the inside of the property hardly ever.
Yeah.
You know, that's going to be something that rarely are you going to be ever able to ever do. And really, even getting information about the property, you know, it's going to be somewhat limited. You know, if you're going to find out information about the property, it's going to be because you've got somebody there creeping around taking photos of it.
Yeah. So the second thing we're going to look at after we've checked out the condition, we've verified that, we're going to check out the market value. And the market value is going to be obviously important because that's going to help us determine what the value is and also how much we're going to pay for it.
Yeah, really, the when we perform comps, you know, we're going to determine the market value basically to try to get an idea of what the property is worth. It's also something that helps us see out profitability, knowing what our maximum bid is going to be. It tells us where our ceiling is at. You know, it tells us exactly how much we should pay and how much we shouldn't pay, because if it goes above a certain amount, it's no longer going to be as profitable. But the value that we estimate for the property is a pretty important factor in deciding whether or not we're going to get it, and also in how much we pay. So most of the time when people are talking about market value and when they're talking about selling their home, chances are they're using a comparable market formula to determine their home's value. If they've got a realtor that is that's helping them determine their value, they're using a comparable market formula to set their price.
Yeah, this is kind of one of the first things I learned when I became a real estate agent before we got involved in tax sale investing, was how to evaluate homes using a comparative market analysis. And so essentially what we're doing is we're evaluating similar type homes that are for sale or currently sold within the area that are similar to the property that we're looking at. A lot of times we call these comps or comparables within our trainings. And so that's something that we're going to do on any one of these properties that we're researching. We want to determine exactly what would the market value be if this property was, you know, ready to sell on the open market with your traditional warranty deed.
Yeah, the most accurate indication of value are other properties that are similar that are currently for sale or that have sold recently in that area. That's what's really going to tell us how much the property is worth, are these comps that we're going to perform. You know, furthermore, that's for market value. If we're looking to sell these properties, you know, we can determine how much they would be valued at on the at full market value. But we also check wholesale values on things. A lot of times when we go and look at comps in an area, we're trying to see what the cheapest properties are that are for sale in the area, because we may have the ability to pick up properties really cheap in that area. And so we know that if the cheapest property we can find in that area is $10,000, and if we can get a property at a good deal, if we can get a property for $200 to $500 there, we know that that $10,000 amount that they start at is going to give us quite a bit of room in there for profitability. We could list a property for $5,000 and easily be the cheapest thing available in the area.
Yeah, yeah. Usually if we're looking at structured properties, we'll try to go through it. Usually it'll make sense to go through what we call a quiet title process so that we can sell it for full market value. But like Shade said, when we're looking at even comparables, we're going to find, let's say we're looking at a 3-bedroom 2-bath home, we're not going to find the most expensive 3-bedroom 2-bath homes to be our comps. We're going to find the cheapest, most junky 3-bedroom 2-bath homes to use as comparables. That way, once we fix it up, if it even sells for higher than that, we're going to make that much more profit.
Yeah, it gives us a better profit of margin in case we make some kind of an error in the purchase, which has happened before. Where something has gone wrong that we didn't necessarily account for. And when that does happen, it's really important that you haven't overestimated comps and you haven't overestimated your value, because you need that built-in profitability to handle issues when they come up.
Yeah, exactly. We bought a property one time that we didn't know it had termites and some water damage that we weren't aware of it. If we wouldn't have built that in within the price, then we wouldn't have been as profitable as we should have been. Yeah. So to find comps, we're really going to use a couple of different resources. Number one is property value websites, and then we're also going to be able to check county online records as well.
Yeah, the property value websites, though, that are out there, part of what makes investing right now in real estate so much easier is our ability to do a lot of these things online that we couldn't do online 20 years ago. And the property valuation websites are something that save us quite a bit of time. Sites like Zillow we use all the time to get a quick idea on comps, because for us especially, the comps don't have to be 100% accurate, because we're not selling these things we don't sell everything for full market value, but we need to get an idea of what's for sale in the area and what the prices are. We need to know what the prices are within a range, and so Zillow is perfect for something like that because we can determine that pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll use Zillow, other resources like Realtor.com to find these comparables, and then essentially we're able to go through and do a comparative market analysis and really help determine what the property value is.
Yeah, county records also, counties track every real estate sale. I mean, ultimately, they are the source for sales records.
Yeah, well, and some counties have it really accessible. In fact, sometimes you can look at even the property record, and on some areas, there's a link right there on the property record that'll pull up comparable sales in the area. So it kind of depends on, the county with how much information that they have available. You may have to call and say, hey, do you have the records of the sales that have happened within the last 3 months or whatever? They might be able to send you over an Excel doc or something.
Yeah, but a lot of times they are just online tools that you find on the county website as you're going through property records.
Yeah, exactly. And so like Zillow and these websites use this information to pull the information that they get.
Yeah.
So they'll use the county records and the county sales information to pull it. So when you see, this property sold on Zillow, they actually pulled that through the county record information.
Yeah. So the county really is the ultimate source for records like sales. But wherever it is that we get the comps from, the method is really pretty simple. We're basically trying to find similar or comparable properties that are in the area that have sold recently, and we're going to try to find those that are closest to the property that we're selling, especially if we're talking about some kind of a home. We want it to be a home that's very comparable in size, in bedrooms, features, in garage, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So for this example, we've got an 1,800 square foot home, similar 3-bedroom 2-bath, built in 1965. And so we can see these 3 similar homes here. And if we take this on home number 1, that sold price of $105,000, and we divide it by the 1,700 square feet, that comes out to about $62 a square foot. The home 2 comes out to about $60 a square foot, and home 3 comes out to about $55 a square foot. So in doing our comparable within this property, we can see that it sells between $55 to $62 a square foot. And if we had a home that was similar to these homes, it would probably sell within that price range, based on the comparables that we did.
Yeah, in fact, it would be a pretty accurate way of determining, that it was, where it was valued at, and one that's not just based off of anything. It's based off of really the closest information to verify value, which are these recent sales.
Yeah, exactly.
Potential risks. There are a lot of potential risks when it comes to buying structured properties, specifically because, in addition to buying the property, the assumption when you're buying a property with improvements is that the property is in good workable condition, and the value is based on that assumption as well. So to buy a property, to get it into, to that value, it has to be in good workable condition, and if it's not, it could require significant investment in order to get it to that point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you see one of those homes that is just completely hashed, there's a chance that maybe somebody didn't pay their property taxes and it essentially went to the state, or went through some type of tax sale foreclosure. It's not, it's not always the most beautiful home with the white picket fence, that was built 15 years ago or 10 years ago in an upscale neighborhood, Sure, those type of properties will come through, but a lot of these are going to need a little bit of work. They may have had somebody that died, and they've been vacant for the last year and a half. There's a lot of different reasons why these properties would potentially come up to the market, but that's why it's so important that we, do the on-site evaluation to determine the condition, do the comparative market analysis to determine the value, and then go through and evaluate for any of these potential risks so that we don't make a mistake.
Yeah. In fact, certainly when you're buying tax sale properties and properties with improvements, you're going to have to take whatever you have in your mind as being a nice property, or whatever you've learned about real estate up to this point. You almost have to take that stuff and just throw it away, because it's not important. What is important is the value and use of the property and what you're paying for it. Those are the ultimate factors. It's not about if you want to live there, we don't care. It doesn't matter if you want to live there or not. It doesn't matter if you think it's pretty or not, or if even if maybe it's not in the area that you like, or maybe it's not the neighborhood that you would want. A lot of those things really don't matter. At least they don't matter nearly as much as the property itself and how much we're paying for it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter nearly as much as the condition and the value.
Yeah.
Those are going to be the most important things, even more than location, because, ultimately it comes down to what we're paying. If we find a nice structured property and maybe it's not in a location that we would prefer to live, but it's a clean property and has value, and we're picking it up for, 10 cents on the dollar, then it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, everybody needs a place to live. And, that's not something that is slowing down. It's only going to grow in need. And so you can always find a way, you can always sell something that's livable.
Yeah.
You're always going to be able to sell something that's livable. And the cheaper it is, the easier it is to sell.
It's just kind of funny sometimes with, if we get a brand new coaching student that doesn't know a lot, and they'll say, well, I wouldn't want to live there. Well, yeah, you may not want to live there, but we're looking at it from an investment standpoint. And if it's clean, if it's a good particular property and you're buying it for a discount, then regardless if you wholesale the property, put it in another, investor's hands, or go through quiet title and sell it for full market value, you're making money on the deal, and that's what's most important.
Yeah, seriously, there are plenty of properties that would be worth buying if you can get them for the right price. It's so much of it comes down to the price that you're paying for properties. Now, we talked a little bit in the beginning about how these were real foreclosures. These are properties that have actually been foreclosed on through the courts, and that foreclosure itself wipes out any kinds of encumbrances or attachments to the property. In other words, if there's a bank name on there because they used to have a mortgage on the property, if there's other entities on there, judgments, they get wiped out and extinguished during that foreclosure process. Literally, the foreclosure wipes out anything attached to the property. The only exception to that, and the only thing that the judicial foreclosure can't wipe out or extinguish are other government issued liens. So that's the only thing that can remain attached to the property after you purchase it. That's also the only thing we really need to check for or watch out for with the property in terms of other claims or liens.
Yeah.
It's only government liens we have to worry about, and that would be something like a municipal lien or maybe an IRS lien.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. In addition to that, we're also going to look out for any properties that are obviously condemned or major rehabs, and hopefully we'll be able to avoid those through, our on-site evaluations in determining that.
Yeah. No, the government liens are, something that we check for with every property, and the risk is simply this: it is that you could buy a property that has some kind of a lien that is still against it that you couldn't get removed. Basically, a lien that would have to be paid at some point. And so, what we want to do is we want to avoid buying a property and not knowing about the lien and getting surprised by it. If we're going to buy a property, we want to know what liens are against the property and how much they are before we buy, so we can account for that in the cost.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to research for, any type of lien, whether that be an IRS lien, some type of state tax lien, or city liens. And city liens a lot of times are going to be a utility type lien. So that could be, maybe a water lien, some type of sewer
like
district
utility
lien. Yeah, maybe also a common one is something like a grass cut lien or a cleanup lien where the city had to send somebody out to mow the grass, anything like that. And so like Shade said, we're going to research those if there is any to make sure that it still fits within our budget. So, if we're looking at a property and there's $150 grass cut lien, well, based on how much we're spending, that's not going to be a big deal. But if suddenly there was, a $15,000 lien, then that could totally affect the investment, and maybe we wouldn't even buy that property.
Yeah, which oftentimes these properties that end up in tax sales can have other types of liens placed against them. There can be odd situations or circumstances.
They haven't been paying their property taxes.
Yeah.
They very well could have other, several other type of bills or things that are due. What's nice about it is that if they have a mortgage, if they have judgments, if they have mechanics liens or any type of lien like that, as long as it's not governmental, those are going to be wiped out through the foreclosure process. But we are going to need to really research and make sure that the property is free and clear of these government liens, and if not, how much they are. And also, if there is governmental liens, it can be worth it to contact the person that has that debt, explain to them that you're interested in purchasing this property, and see if they're willing to negotiate that lien down. We've had different organizations or cities that have negotiated liens down to 80 cents, down to 20 cents on the dollar, essentially.
Enough that it can change the numbers
discount.
enough.
Yeah,
I can change it so that it's not a large enough amount to impact the investment negatively. In fact, when we go to research these properties here prior to purchase, aside from determining what the value is on the property and what we believe we can sell it for, checking our comps, the majority of the research that we're doing is just to find government liens.
Yeah.
So if we, in some cases, if we're investing a larger amount of money, we may have a professional title search done on the property to help us locate any of those liens. If it's a smaller amount of money that we're investing, then we may do or go through a number of steps to do a type of title search on our own. We can at least dig into the deeds on the property and learn more about the ownership and check for liens that way.
Yeah, it's something we teach our membership program, students that are part of the membership program, on how to essentially go do what we call an investor title search, where you are searching the past owners' names and the court records to see if there's any governmental liens. But like Shade said, if we're spending more money, then we may pay for a title company to do what we call a lien search, or what they call a lien search, I guess, where they're just pulling up the liens against the property. That's what we're most concerned about. We're not usually too concerned about the long-term history of the property like your normal title search would do. What we're mostly concerned about is, what are the governmental liens, how much are they, if there is any, and it does it make sense to buy it and not.
Yeah, yeah. We can also oftentimes tell from looking at the property how difficult or easy it's going to be to take it through quiet title. We can learn a little bit about that by looking at the ownership history on it. The other thing that we're really watching out, though, when it comes to structured properties are properties that have problems with the condition. There's actually a lot of condemned properties out there, or properties that should be condemned.
Yeah, exactly. There's probably a ton of properties that probably should be condemned if somebody was to walk through the property, but they've been, boarded up and nobody's been in the property for years. And so that's what, next to what we've talked about, and it's really one of the biggest risks, and it comes into condition, and that's the reason we talked about it first in the on-site evaluation, is looking for properties that need major rehab, especially if they're lower value homes. Some of these homes that need major rehab are only worth $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 on the market value.
Yeah.
And if you're spending $20,000 on a new roof, then suddenly, you could totally have an investment that goes underwater, over water.
Well, and the property values in an area may be low enough to where make it so that it's not really worth it to buy properties and try to fix them up in that area. For instance, if a home's valued at $200,000 and it needs some work, if you can get it for a low enough price, it can be worth putting in because it has such significant value. But if the properties there are only valued at $50,000, you've got a lot less room to work there if it needs some kind of major rehab. Putting $10,000 into a property that may only be worth $50,000, altogether, is much riskier. So that's something else we pay attention to, is what the ceiling is there for starter homes in that area. Properties can always get more expensive, but we're trying to compare them to other starter homes or properties that somebody might purchase as at the lower end of the price scale.
Yeah, and one point to make on that is, regardless of what the price is, we know areas in the country where you can buy probably homes for a couple $100. Well, if you're now a couple $100 you're spending, you're buying a property that could be potentially condemned. That may not be condemned up and now, but once you get into that property, you are looking at major rehab cost, and the rehab cost doesn't justify trying to fix up the property and sell it.
Yeah.
It costs more to fix it. It's like, say you have it like some old broken down 90s car or something. It's not a classic. Nobody loves it. It's going to cost more to fix it than it's worth driving.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, it's a value proposition, that you're looking at, and how much money it's going to be worth sinking it into the property. In fact, believe it or not, we oftentimes will avoid structured property and focus on raw land because it helps us avoid some of the issues that are related to property condition and structure. When it is raw land, it makes it a little bit easier to simply buy based on the value and location and accessibility. But targeting the right kinds of property, if you are going to buy property with improvements, is important. And there's a number of things that we can do to ensure that the properties we're targeting the right kinds.
Yeah, and really, when it comes to structured property, really we will target any type of structured property as long as the condition and the price is right. So those are the two things that are most important. So regardless if it's a condo, a mobile home with land, even mobile home without land, if we have land that we can put it on, duplexes, apartment buildings, vacation homes, cabins, anything, as long as the condition is good and the price is good, we don't care about the location. We don't care about anything other than really the price and the value.
Well, and if you always want to be able to sell property, one of the easy ways to ensure that is to focus on the lower end of the price spectrum, because people are always going to need cheaper, more affordable places to live. So as an example, if you're focusing on placing mobile homes on cheap pieces of land or purchasing properties like that, you're probably never going to have a problem selling your properties, because they're always going to be something that somebody can live in, and they're at the lower end of the price scale. So anybody that's looking at that starter home, anybody that's looking for a place to live, could potentially use it. And so it's always going to have that use and value it will be pretty easy. I think it's always going to be easy to get people into a property like that.
Yeah, and we've seen every type of property you could imagine. I mean, we've even seen golf courses with the clubhouse and everything come up to sell before at the tax sale. So every type of property you could imagine. We've seen like a Kmart before.
Yeah.
So we've seen about every kind of property you can imagine. The ones you're going to avoid, obviously, ones that are major rehabs that they're condemned or need to be torn down. If they have large governmental liens, we're going to avoid those if we can't negotiate that government lien down.
Yeah.
Well, also, when it comes to structured properties, this is, one area that we may avoid incredibly high crime areas and distressed areas, really more kind of distressed areas. So if every home on the block is pretty much boarded up, then we're going to avoid that neighborhood. If we're the only house that's boarded up, even if it's kind of a little bit more of a rougher, more high crime area, is if everyone else is occupied on the house and we're the only one that's boarded up, or we're the one of the few houses that's a problem on that street, then that's fine.
Yeah, it's always better to be.
We just want to make sure people are living there.
Yeah, we're always willing to buy the ugly duckling in the neighborhood. We just want to make sure that we're not buying something that is in a whole neighborhood
of ugly ducklings.
Yeah, of ugly ducklings. then we want to avoid those. But we never have a problem though buying a property that needs some work, that's in a neighborhood that people are living in and that's useful.
Yeah.
The oversaturated market is also something that we look at in some places. At least it's probably more of an issue with land. We don't run into it so much with improvements, but with raw land, we look at how much property is for sale in the market and what the prices are, where they start at.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it could apply in some scenarios with single family homes, but usually if you're buying them for a discount there, it wouldn't really apply as much.
Now, evaluating the deal, there are additional costs that you need to account for when you are buying properties, especially properties with improvements like a home. In addition to the rehab costs, which are really difficult to calculate or estimate, seeing that you can't get inside the property, so you're guessing on a lot of stuff. There is also additional holding costs or things like legal costs for quiet title. In a quiet title is the process we take the tax deed through to turn that tax deed into a warranty deed, and that's what we would need to do in order to sell the property for full market value to somebody that's going to get financing to buy it. So if we want to get the top dollar price out of it, then we're going to have to pay that that cost for quiet title. So we need to account for it, which it could be $1,000, $2,000. It's enough cost there that we need to be prepared for it when we go to buy the property.
Yeah, we also need to be prepared to pay at least a year's worth of property taxes, because it could easily take, when we're talking about structured properties, a year to go through a quiet title, to do rehab, to put it on the market, and then to get it sold. So, we're going to include that as well. Also, locksmith, we're going to have to send somebody out there as soon as we've acquired the property to get it relocked so that we can secure it. We may need, to get a handyman or somebody out there to clean the property. We may get insurance of some sort, liability insurance, homeowners, some type of, insurance to protect it.
Yeah, especially with a property with improvements. Not so much with raw land. We're not as worried about that. But if we're buying some kind of property with a structure on it, then that becomes more important. Getting the insurance on it. But these are all holding costs that we want to account for and kind of add into our overall investments. So that we're planning on. We've got the cost of the deed, plus we've got any rehab costs and quiet title costs, and we're adding all of that together when we're considering the proposition of whether or not to buy it.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, once we've determined the property value, we can determine our high bid amount. Once we've determined our cost, we've gone through and kind of determined what our rehab costs, what are our holding costs going to be, then we can really kind of come up with how much we're willing to spend on the property. But when it comes to buying tax deed properties and these structured properties, buying the wrong tax deed home, buying a tax deed home that needs, major rehab, or, some of the things that we've talked about have some type of governmental lien that we're not aware of because we haven't done the research. These are all things that could totally make a tax deed deal turn into a negative deal, turn into one where you're losing money.
Yeah, in fact, I think when it comes to properties with improvements, it's not necessarily a bad idea if it's not your first property that you purchase. It can be a good idea if you're a little bit familiar with the process and how it works before you go to buy one of the properties with improvements, because there's quite a few things to remember there without all the things related to the improvements themselves. Everything related to the improvements themselves is quite a bit to remember. And so a lot of times if you start off with just raw land, it can simplify the process, help you learn how to buy in that area, so that when you do go to buy improvements, it's a little bit easier.
Yeah, absolutely. So, be sure to do an on-site evaluation, check the market, and, have fun at the auction. There's a huge amount of opportunity out there to attend auctions, to buy not only, homes and structured properties, but land as well. It's just a matter of making sure we do all the proper due diligence, and you're good to go.
Yeah, in fact, there's more opportunities today with tax sales than there have ever been before. It's getting easier than it's ever been before, because more and more counties are making the information accessible. We've got better access to county records, and counties seem to be wising up to the opportunity before them to get rid of their tax sale properties and collect that money that's owed to them, get new owners into it that'll pay property taxes. It's a great time to be involved right now, and for everybody that's here, obviously you're interested in tax sales. There really never has been a better time, I think, for you to get involved and to start buying things wherever it may be. There's opportunities all across the country.
Yeah, if you like the type of training that we offer, and you haven't checked out our membership program, go ahead and do that at taxsalesupport.com. Essentially, we think
it's a no-brainer for training. It's $30 a month. You're going to get access to training information as well as lists. We do live trainings.
Yeah, we do live trainings like this every week, where we talk about a different topic every week. We have all of the auction lists.
Yeah, it's embarrassingly cheap right now, really.
Yeah.
And eventually we're going to increase the price here for what we're offering, but we wanted to be able to offer something that allowed people to get the training that they needed, to get access to the lists without breaking the bank.
Yeah,
and that's what membership's all about.
Yeah, and in fact, for this call, what we're going to do later today is we'll go ahead and send out a replay of today's webinar, and we're also going to include a link on there that anyone that attended today's webinar can actually set up a strategy session with some of our guys here, and they can help you get pointed in the right direction. So
yeah, free strategy session.
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and send out a link that'll have the replay of this training, as well as a link if you're interested in a strategy session to get you pointed in the right direction. We can go ahead and get that set up for you as well.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for that information. We'll get that information sent out shortly, and hopefully we'll be hearing from more of you soon.
Yep, thank you guys. We appreciate you attending this morning, and thanks again.
Yeah, have a great weekend. We'll see you.